Hey, all you Gretas and Shutezcats out there. Welcome to Unit 5, Section 6, Pest Control Methods. So here we go. So the U.S. uses 1/3 worldwide pesticide use. This is ridiculous. Maybe we should not do this. Once again, this goes back to the industrialized farming, and we just kind of throw chemicals and machines at everything to get things done as quickly as possible for the largest amount of money now, not paying attention to any of the consequences. So here are the pounds of pesticides applied to various crops by watershed. We have a ton here in the Midwest. Bad. All right, so we have, I think, 5 main kinds of pest control methods that are being used. There's not really a spot on your packet for this, so I would kind of jot it down wherever you want to, up at the top. So we have our broad-scale pesticides that'll take out pretty much everything. We have, so these are taking out your pests. You have your herbicides that are going to, that's your weed killers is the easiest way to think of that. You have your fungicides, which will take out funguses. Rodenticides take out your rats and mice and all those guys. And then other insecticides to take out everything else. So pesticides, the environmental drawbacks. They often will kill non-target species, including beneficial predators, pollinators, and various nitrogen fixers. Bees have been a big issue with when they sprayed something to get the mosquitoes. With the Zika virus, they killed a whole lot of bees too. So we're really good at killing things we didn't mean to kill, especially very, very important things. We also have, let's move me over here. There we go. We can have what is called bioaccumulation or biomagnification. So as the contaminants, bioaccumulation is going to happen across a food chain. So the little fish have a very little amount. They're eaten by the medium fish, who now have a larger amount. They're eaten by the even larger fish. Toxins tend to accumulate in your fat, so they don't really go away. So then these guys have a bunch, and then these guys have way too much. And then if you think of the birds of prey or whatnot that eat these, even bigger. Biomagnification, I'm sorry, I lied to you guys. Bioaccumulation is happening in the individual fish or individual thing. Biomagnification is having over the food chain. So these guys have a little, these guys have more, these guys have more, these guys have even more. So these little fish, as they grow up and eat more stuff, are going to have more. DDT is a big one. It was a pesticide in the 60s, 70s, and it was deemed illegal 78, I think. And we still can find it today. So just because it's made illegal doesn't mean people still don't use it or that it's not still out there in the environment, because it's really hard to clean up chemicals in every lake and river and stream. So you have this bioaccumulation in the critters and biomagnification across the food webs of various toxins. You also have natural selection or resistance, and this is a positive feedback loop. So you kill stuff, the survivors are now resistant to whatever the thing is, and so you kill off most of them, but the ones that are genetically resistant survive, and then they reproduce and make lots of babies, passing on that resistant gene, which means then you need to spray them with a new chemical, which is going to put more pesticides out there, and then the same thing happens. You'll have a gene for the resistance to the next one, and you'll have more, and then you need to spray more, and then you have more, and so on and so forth. Pollution, that's awkward. Pollution of groundwater. So as all of these chemicals are going into the soil, they percolate down, go into the groundwater, and stay for way, way too long. You can't really get stuff out of the groundwater. You also have pesticide drift. So if you apply pesticides here, you can have the point source is the contamination. So we contaminated here. It can seep down. It can leach into the water. It can run off into the water. It can actually evaporate up and then get rained down or blown elsewhere. So a lot of people who live anywhere close to a farm often have negative effects like this, toxicity to humans. So you can think of just plain old air pollution is causing us issues. Water pollution causes different ones, but then the soil contamination. So whether these herbicides and pesticides are getting into the air or the water or the soil, all of those things can affect us in some way, and all of them are bad. We're going to play a game. It will be on Canvas. It's super fun. I did good at it, so hopefully you guys will as well. I just had fun playing with this. So now we're on to GMO stuff. So GMO is genetically modified organism. So our top 10 genetically modified foods: corn, soy, cottonseed, papaya, rice, rapeseed, which is canola. That's why they call it canola oil, because no one would buy rapeseed oil. Potatoes, tomatoes, dairy, and peas. There is a video. I will have the link for you in Canvas. We're not going to watch it now. So here's a bunch of GMO facts. It is a direct human manipulation of an organism's DNA in a lab. It is not selective breeding that, hey, this makes more strawberries and this makes larger strawberries. And so we breed them together and then we make larger, more strawberries. This is, we're directly influencing the DNA. So strawberries don't like cold. Fish can handle cold. So you take the I can handle cold and you put it in the strawberries, and then you get fish strawberries, and you've all eaten this. And that's what's out there. So sometimes you can genetically modify things to produce their own pesticides, but then the bugs just become resistant to that, so it's no big deal. There's no long-term testing. We don't know a lot because it's still fairly new. You probably eat GMOs every day. If it is organic, it does not contain GMOs. So if you are still nervous about consuming genetically modified organisms, you can go that route. So traditional artificial selection has been practiced for thousands of years. This is what corn used to look like. And it makes two forms. There's the male and the female form of the plant. So the female form got intentionally bred to become what we now have as our corn. This is plain old artificial selection. And some people will call this genetic modification. We're not talking about that kind. We're not talking artificial selection. We're talking like messing with the genes of the thing directly by human interaction. This is wild mustard. And depending on what they focused on, we get all of these different vegetables from it, which I think is pretty cool. So this is artificial selection over years and years and years. Thousands of years we've been doing this. That's fine. So modern techniques, this is what we're doing now. We isolate a specific gene from an organism and we transfer it into the genetic material of another. So the axolotls that used to be in my classroom, they took the gene from a jellyfish and they put it into my axolotl, and now their bones glow under black light, which was really cool. But they have been genetically modified. They took the bioluminescent from the jellyfish and now it's in my axolotls. So you pull the gene, you put it into something else, and then you put it in. So an easy way is to put, first time I've yawned in a while. First, bacteria will reproduce, and now you have a whole bunch of bacteria with whatever this new characteristic is. It's really easy to do. I think I did this in college. You'll get to do this in college. It's sadly fairly easy. Benefits. You can increase the quality, quantity, and decrease cost of doing stuff. So if you have a crop that is being eaten by something and you can genetically modify it to kill that pest, there you go. You don't have to spend money on pesticides. So you can make things that are pest resistant or drought resistant. They can get by with less water. You can also put things into it. A lot of children die or go blind because of lack of access to vitamin A. So this guy created vitamin A rich rice. So now if the kids just eat this rice instead of this rice, they don't die. Win. Pharmaceutical companies can reduce the cost of manufacturing things. So if you are diabetic or know anyone who's diabetic, the insulin they use actually comes from bacteria. They used to use bovine or cow insulin, which is not human insulin. But what they did is they took the gene from a human to grow human insulin, and they put it into a bacteria. And bacteria reproduce super fast, so they have billions of these guys in petri dishes in labs all over the country making insulin. So these little guys have the gene in them to make human insulin, and we have these bacteria that do our bidding and give us insulin. So that's where your insulin comes from, if you take it. You can reduce expenses, increase profits, and lower food prices, depending on how many of your GM crops you use. Here, you also can, move me back over here, reduce CO2 emissions. So by not using as many of the pesticides or the fertilizers, you can use different things. I'm just moving all over the place. Concerns. Is it safe for human consumption? Probably. There's little evidence, and food allergies can be an issue. I remember when GMOs were newer, they had a GMO corn that they used in Taco Bell taco shells, the ones you buy at the grocery store. And some people had an allergy to that. So all of a sudden they're like, oh, don't buy those because you can get sick. So food allergies, you might not be allergic to normal corn, but this genetically modified version, you might be. GMOs themselves aren't necessarily bad, but it's the stuff that goes along with them. So I'll get there in a second. So they also can affect biodiversity. Here is a genetically modified salmon, and here is a regular salmon, little dinky guy. But if they are both out in the water together and they breed together, now you're going to have some interesting hybrid version that might not work. So if they breed with those wild relatives, they could alter or eliminate the natural varieties, and we don't want that to happen. So having buffer zones where they can't interact, and we can massively lose genetic diversity from the regular guys if we let the genetically modified ones take over, because their genetics are going to be much more limited because we made them ourselves. Patenting, this is crazy. So the Supreme Court ruled in 1980 that companies could patent the DNA sequences of their genetically modified seeds. If you own the patent, you own the seed, which means you own how people can use it. And one of the biggest things that Monsanto did is Monsanto makes Roundup, which is used as a pesticide, or a weed killer, sorry. It's a weed killer. So what they do is they have genetically modified corn and soy to be resistant to Roundup. So you can just dump Roundup all over your crops. It takes care of the weeds, but then it doesn't kill your crops. But what Monsanto said is if you use our crops, our seeds, you can only use them for 1 year, and then you have to buy new seeds. So there were lawsuits because for all of history, people had just saved some of their crops at the end of the year, used those seeds, planted them again the next year. That's how you farm. But Monsanto put an end to that when they decided they owned the gene, they owned the patent, they owned the seeds. They could tell you how to use their product. So there was a lot of lawsuits that happened around that time with Monsanto. So they have this Roundup Ready corn, and if they reuse it, they are found guilty of copyright infringement. So there we go. Monsanto is not a good company. 10 companies control about 73% of our seeds. So if you garden, I would recommend not buying things made from them. I would be buying organic, non-GMO stuff just because you definitely know what's in that. And you're not supporting a company like Monsanto. So my issue is not necessarily the GMO side of it, but I know if I'm eating regular stuff, it's covered in Roundup, and Roundup has been linked to cancer and other really bad things. And most other countries don't use it, but we use it here in the United States because guess who donates to the politicians? So over time, both atrazine, which has been proven to cause frogs to turn into hermaphrodites, which is kind of messed up, and glyphosate, which is a big fancy other chemical in Roundup, which has been linked to cancer and other diseases, their use has gone up as the Roundup Ready crops have been used more and more and more. And if you look, here are the companies that sell the seeds, and oh look, they also sell the pesticides. So what do you think? They're connected to each other. So I would personally support companies that aren't making money off of selling poison. That's just me. Once again, we have all these patents on genetically modified organisms. Michael Crichton has a book called Next. It came out a while ago, but it talks about a lot of the stuff, and it's fiction, but there's some fact in there too. So regulation. There's no mandated labeling in the US, so you don't know if what you are eating is genetically modified. The European Union bans many GMOs. Organic food does not contain GMOs. So I choose myself personally, and I'm not representing any thoughts other than my own, to eat as organic as possible because it's not the GMO I'm trying to avoid, it's the Roundup on the GMO that I'm trying to avoid, if that makes sense. And they are claiming that labeling confuses the uninformed. So is there something wrong with GMOs or is there not? And if there's nothing wrong with it, why label? Once again, for me, it's about I don't want to consume the Roundup, not I don't want to consume the GMO. So that's my thoughts on things. And we have surveyed these notes. So before we go, I want to let each and every one of you know that you are good enough, you are smart enough, and people do like you. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good God, do your homework.